Hi, welcome to the Small Shed. This week I'm on the turn and that's coming up next. Hi, welcome to the Small Shed. As if I hadn't got enough on my plate with all the timber and cutting and messing around I've got for the children's play equipment for my grandchildren for Christmas, I decided about end of November that it might be an idea to make a present for my wife for Christmas as well, because I've never really had the facilities to do anything in the woodworking line that would have been much use. And on one of the Woodworking UK Facebook pages the other week, somebody had come up with a turned item which I'd not seen before. They do a lot of pens and pen blanks, things like that, and these were very similar, but it was for an unpicker for quilting. And as my wife does quilting and sewing, I thought it might be something that I could have a go at. I've never done any turning before and I haven't got a lathe other than a metalworking one. So I thought I'd call upon the services of Men in Sheds. They've got a lathe down there. There's 2 or 3 people down there with the skills and hopefully the patience to be able to show me the way. And I mentioned it the other week, and within a day or so a kit had appeared and all the equipment, mandrels and things that I needed to do it. So with great thanks to Phil, I had a go the other day. He pointed me in the right direction, and I had a thoroughly enjoyable morning doing this. I did take some video, but it's not brilliant because I was more interested in actually learning how to turn than take video. But there's a few sections of it here for you to watch, and I'll just run through what I've done with it, and you can see the finished result when we've got that in the middle, or
in the left hand chuck, yeah, and stick it fairly well in.
Yeah.
And that's the key for that one. And if you go for the corner one, yes, you can see what to do, the corners into the gaps. No, into the gap, put the corners in the gaps.
That way.
Oh, actually, no, if you're going
no,
further in, sorry.
Yeah,
yes.
I got 1 and 2 in. First thing we did was to chuck up a piece of timber. It's square, I think it's oak. It was about 3/4 of an inch square, and that was mounted in the chuck at the one end of the drill of the lathe, and a 6mm drill bit was put in it, and that basically ran a hole right the way through to allow the timber to be mounted on a brass tube.
Unlock it. And I want to see how it spins. Oh, can you hear it now? Alright, so
That one down on the base.
you lock that down on the base and then just wind it in. Yep.
In brass.
Before you go too far.
To this point it's not a lot different to what I'd done with a metalworking setup, because the item is normally mounted in the chuck the same, and the drill or the tools are moved on the lathe itself rather than doing anything by hand manually. Once the hole had been drilled out of that, it was checked just to make sure it was centered up properly, and then the brass tube was roughed up with a bit of 80 grit sandpaper just to enable a key with the super glue. That was put on it just to secure it down the centre of the wooden blank.
I didn't realise it was that nice a fit.
So
Yeah, so you want to get it so that it was tiny bit
Tiny bit
sticking out, so
inside,
you
yeah.
bite on
you get your
bite on the thingy, yeah? So you put it in there first,
which
yeah,
that's the way I do, just to hold it,
And then-
and then I put a little bit of glue at the other end.
put a bit down there.
Yeah, just to catch it. You do have to keep it.
The pencil just to push it in slightly so that the tube was just slightly inside the blank, and then that was put back into the lathe in the chuck again, and a tool was used which is very much like a brad point drill bit. It's got a very flat face to it, and that was pushed into it till it just touched the brass tube, and what that did was to make sure that the ends of the blank were square on to the timber, to the brass tube I mean. The thing was then put onto a mandrel, which is like a big threaded rod that runs between the centres on the lathe, and I had a go at the first part of turning, which I'd never really done, which is, as I say, using a hand gouge. First job was just to take all the corners off the blank itself, because effectively it's square, it's got to be turned down until it's at least a round profile, and that is something you just go at gently, take a little bit at a time off. It's quite forgiving in that if you do stick it in a bit too far, the gouge, it stops the piece on its mandrel, and you can just pull away and start again. Then moved on to a chisel, started to get some shape into it, and there are some circular bits mounted either end of the piece which effectively give you the right diameter, so as long as you don't dig into them with the chisel, you can just bring the wood down to that level, and then it's up to you as to what sort of shape you make the piece between those centres. And I wasn't going to do anything too fancy as it was the first attempt, and we then got some sandpaper, just a couple of different grades of sandpaper just to start to smooth it down, get some decent sort of finish on it. It was a little bit, it had dug in once in one or two places, it was slightly rough, but once you got the sandpaper on it, it would smooth it down. And then we used some sanding sealer, which I remember from my balsa wood aeroplane days. This was put on while the piece was still turning and rubbed in fairly hard, left for a few seconds to dry off, and then it was burnished back up with a bit of cloth, and we did that about, I think it was about 4 or 5 times just to get the finish on the piece itself. We've done that. It seemed to me to be reasonably all right. I could take it all out, take it to pieces, take it off the mandrel. So that's the finished article. It's basically just the brass tube is in the centre, and that's the turned centre part. Just had the sanding sealer on it at the moment, and then there are two items that came with the kit. One is just a plain pointed bodkin or poker of things. They just clip into the end like that. The unpicker goes in the other end. That's that shape. It goes underneath the thread, and then the top ball stops it damaging anything on the top, but there's a very sharp blade in that centre part. That goes in the other end, and then that makes the gift itself. And if you want to use either end, you can just pull it out and push it back in to fit like that. Now there is an option to just leave one end with a tool in it and the other end with a pen clip, as you would with a pen or a propelling pencil. That just goes into the other end. I'll leave my wife that option because I'm not sure she actually will want the pointed thing, other than probably to prod me with. But that's it. We'll now pack it up. Now, having got the unpicker finished, I thought it was probably a good idea to get some sort of nice wrapping for it. I've just found a little box that I'd had some things in, put a little bit of shavings in it. So we'll just pop that into there, and then fold it up. Ready to wrap. And I think I'll put one of the small shed bubble stickers on it. So that's ready now to be wrapped for Christmas. It just remains now for me to wish everyone a happy and festive Christmas. For those of you who don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you have a happy and peaceful time, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, bye.